Our next speaker, as you can all see from the overhead, is Claire Penny from IBM. She's going to be talking about something that's on everyone's agenda, whether you like it or not, energy and carbon reporting. Claire's from the business development area of IBM, but relax, because she is an academic by background, so unlike the rest of business development, she'll be telling the truth. Claire Penny.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of apologies before I start. The first one is I've broken the cardinal rule about how many characters you have on charts. There's some really busy charts, right? But it's just to prove a point that there's a lot going on in this area, and I don't expect you to read them. There's no exam at the end or anything like that, so we're all okay. And just to show of hands, who works in a building? Okay, who has responsibility for running that building, costs, energy? Okay, so hopefully it'll be a little bit relevant to a few people in the room. So new energy and carbon reporting legislation in Europe. Sounds boring, doesn't it? But anyway, I'm going to give it my best to make it interesting. So why are the legislation? That's the best picture I could get of European leaders. There are European leaders, and they have a vision to transform Europe. So this European transformation. And the vision they have is that it's going to come from a low-carbon economy and from a being highly energy efficient. Okay, so what's the roadmap to get us there? So we had the Kyoto Protocol, which I'm guessing everybody in the room knows about. Then we have this 2020, okay? And then beyond 2020, we have 2050, okay? So how do we get there? How do these European leaders compel us European citizens to help them deliver on this vision? So they use a stick, okay? They're using the mechanism known as legislation, okay? And they're ensuring that the key stakeholders play their role in this vision. Okay, and the legislation ensures that the minimum requirements are met by each member state, by each person living within that member state. Okay, so where have we been and where are we going? This is busy now, okay? So we started in 97. I didn't want to go back any further than that. It's not enough room on my PowerPoint. So we had the Kyoto Protocol with a 2012 deadline to reduce carbon emissions. And this all stems back from the scientists alerting everybody, the politicians, everybody, that the world was warming up. We were experiencing global warming at the time. It's now climate change, but there was a 2% rise that was really important. We didn't go above 2%, so we needed mechanisms in place to stop that. So Kyoto Protocol, they all agreed to it. In 2000, I'm going to have to read this over here, sorry. So then we had, in 2003, an internal energy market package that looked at energy distribution, energy production, all that kind of thing, consumer choice. Then moving on quickly, 2005, we saw the Kyoto Protocol come into force and the EU energy trading scheme began. Then in 2007, we had the European Union commits to 2020. Okay, reducing energy again. 2009, we had a third internal focus on energy infrastructure. Copenhagen did not deliver in 2009, so they had to go back to the drawing board. Then the Lisbon Treaty came in and had a dedicated chapter on energy, which was good news for anybody related in energy. 2011, call for completion of the internal energy market by 2014. 2015 roadmap comes in play. Okay, 2015 roadmap says that EU member states will reduce their energy their CO2 emissions by between 80 and 95% of 1990 levels. That's massive. Okay. It also introduces this concept around near net carbon zero buildings. Definition to follow. Okay. So moving on, busy year 2011, we had the extension of Kyoto to 2020. 2012, we have EU efficiency directive is agreed. We have 2013, where we are today. This EU infrastructure package is finalised. We have the consultation of 2030, which is a framework, all part of the roadmap. Is everybody still awake? Are we doing all right? 2014, we had the deadline for the completion of the internal energy market. 2015, we have the deadline for the new global climate change deal. 2020, we have the deadline to commit on the second Kyoto agreement. And 2015, we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by between 80 and 95%. This is from Dixon and Britnell. It was in draft, but I just want to give you a sense that if we just look at the UK and all the legislation and all these EU directives and initiatives and plans that are in play, it makes a lovely, pretty picture, right? But you can see the energy roadmap is really busy. There's lots and lots and lots of things going on. BSRIA pulled out a similar one, you know, discussing Part L and inspection of air conditioning units, etc., to give you an idea. This is the one that everybody quotes, right? This is from Arup. Anybody from Arup here today? No? Okay, great. So this is really busy. So, I mean, this takes you through, you know, when it's due to start, was it implemented, what the legislation is. It's really good, and everybody focuses that. But if you want to print that off, it's about the size of this screen, right? It's massive, it's poster size. So it's really good piece of information. And you could, if you just search Energy Legislation UK Arup, this is what comes up. So it's really informative. But I just wanted to put that there to say you have these directives from the EU coming down, and then each member state has to then implement each of these directives, transpose the information, the directive. And this is the UK, this is what they're doing, so that we want for Italy, for France, for Spain, obviously, right across the EU. And some member states are better at transposing legislation than others, and then acting on it and delivering the targets. So if we look at the Energy Efficiency Directive, this came about because it was obvious that the EU were not on track to reduce CO2 emissions by 20%. So it contains an obligation on member states to draw up this roadmap to make the entire building sector more energy efficient by 2050, okay? So, but it does not set a clear objective for the amount of energy to be reduced, so it's still a little bit open. Because, I mean, as you know, when EU directives are discussed and taken through the Parliament and the Council, etc., everybody within the European Union wants their own say, each member state, so a lot of times they set out really strong and rigid and then they get diluted down. So the Energy Efficiency Directive is a binding measure for member states, and this is a key one, right, for people in this room who offer services to clients in the public sector, that centrally owned and occupied building stock has to be renovated. 3% of that building stock has to be renovated annually. Okay, and it's starting with usable space of 500 metres squared between 2014 and 2020, and that extends to 250 metres squared usable space in July 2015. I saw a stat, I don't know how true it is, you're never too far away from a statistic, but it said that if we started now in the UK to do this, to drive this target and achieve the outcomes, we'd have to start renovating buildings at the rate of one every 4 seconds or something like that. It was really, really, really aggressive. So we'll see. And because this only applies to central government, okay, they're going to have to be more voluntary measures to bring everybody else into the fold to achieve this aggressive target of 80 to 95% CO2 reduction in 2050. So I just took the highlights from the Energy Efficiency Directive. So you have to have the national energy efficiency targets, there's 3% renovation, public sector energy efficient procurement, so anything that public sector purchases has to be energy efficient, be it HVAC or, you know, AV systems, whatever. And then energy efficient obligation schemes, there's got to be audits and environmental management. There's got to be metering and informative billing. There has to be promotion of CHP and DHC, emission transmission and distribution, transmission and distributions in there, tighter requirement for energy service providers. So if you're providing a service, there's going to be tighter controls on your qualifications, on your experience, etc. The energy services market, it's got to be promoted and accessible, and then there's review and monitoring. So it's really, you know, a whole energy management system coming into play here through this legislation. So that brings me on to the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. Okay, so that's just recast now. And this is what's included there. Again, it's around calculation methods, energy performance. You'll know the energy performance certificates that have to be displayed if you are leasing, etc. So again, you know, I don't want you to read all of this text, but there's a lot in there, and a lot of it's in relation to public sector buildings. But if you have a building that's accessible by the public, you also have to look at this as well. Now, yesterday, I think we have it here. Yeah, yesterday, another, just on it, park that for now. UK-only legislation. The Companies Act legislation came in for the Strategic Reporting Directors report for the change of the Companies Act, 2006. This started yesterday. This mandates that every company listed on the main market of the London Stock Exchange report their CO2 emissions from their operations, okay, in their annual report. And so if something goes in their annual director's report, it requires an audit. So now your carbon emissions have to be audited. So now you've kind of got to have them in a nice way. And I chose our friends at RBS as their annual report because they're on this list. And I bet they've had about 1,000 phone calls about this from companies who are offering a service to help them do this. But I'm sure they're doing it already. So it's the combustion of fuel and the operation of any facility, and it must state the annual tonnes, the quantity in tonnes of CO2 equivalent rising from the purchase of electricity, heat, steam, or cooling by the company for its own use. Okay, so this is all in the annual report, and you set boundaries. You have to have a ratio, to say an activity ratio, forget the correct word here, on how you can benchmark that against what you actually do. So is it CO2 per employee full-time equivalent or something like that. So that's big. This brings a lot of people in that wouldn't necessarily have been in to drive this emissions, CO2 emissions decrease.